Hello class, and welcome to Module 1, Rent versus Buy. In this module, we explain the classic question asked by prospective homebuyers. Is it more advantageous to buy a home or to continue renting? Welcome, we're happy you joined us today. I'll be your guide for this career learning lesson about real estate. Get your notebook and pen ready to take notes as you learn new concepts. Our three learning outcomes today are: number one, identify the primary economic differences comparing home ownership to renting a home as a tenant. Number two, calculate the long-term economic effects of real property ownership. And number three, explain the classic rent versus buy comparison to a prospective real estate client. Just what are the differences between home ownership and renting a home? Are there advantages to buying a home? What are the pros and cons? Let's find out so you can explain the comparison to your clients. In the traditional age-old question of purchasing real estate, there are four economic factors to compare. Number one is the initial payment. Number two are the monthly payments. Number three are the assets. And lastly, number four is the equity. Let's take a closer look at each of the factors. The initial payment is how much cash will be required to pay out of pocket. When purchasing a home, it's the down payment and closing costs. When renting a home, it's a security deposit and the first 2 months' rent. Let's compare each of these. In this example, the home buyer paid a down payment and closing costs of approximately $16,000 total. That's twice the amount of the tenant, whose security deposit plus first month's rent totaled $8,000. In the short term, it may appear that renting would be more advantageous. The second factor is monthly payments. Now we'll compare the monthly mortgage payment with the rent payments. Keep in mind that mortgage interest is typically tax deductible on annual income tax returns. With a fixed rate mortgage, the monthly payments stay the same for the life of the loan. After the loan is paid off, there are no more payments. Of course, there are other costs associated with home ownership, such as property taxes and insurance, both of which are typically tax deductible. On the other hand, the rental payments will only increase. Rents are typically raised every year to keep pace with inflation. In this example, the rent was initially lower than the mortgage, but in the long run, it's clear to see the mortgage as much more advantageous. The third factor is property valuation. The value refers to how much money the property is worth at any given point in time. It's based on the local real estate market as well as the condition of the home. The blue line on this chart is an example of rising property values. Even though there were periods of both gains and losses, overall we see the average values rise over time. Because real estate appreciates over the long run, it's considered an effective hedge against inflation. This illustration demonstrates the increasing value of real property over time. At the end of 30 years, this sample property has increased in value substantially. On the other hand, the tenant has no assets, either at the beginning or the end of the 30 years. Owning an asset is definitely an advantage. Now the fourth factor, equity. That's how much of the asset is actually owned free and clear. It's the difference between the property value and the mortgage balance. To calculate the equity in a property, we start with the property value. Subtract the mortgage balance. If there's a home equity line of credit, subtract that debt also. The difference equals the equity. This is the cash the owner would put in their pocket if they sold the home. In this graph, the homeowner's equity continues to grow over time. We see that it increases exponentially in the long run. In contrast, the renter has no equity, neither in the short run nor in the long run. Let's see how real estate equity grows. For the property owner, there are three primary methods of gaining equity. The first is simply the rising value of real estate, which happens naturally over long periods of time. The second is by increasing the property value with renovations. The third is by paying down the principal balance of the mortgage. In summary, you are now able to, number one, identify the primary economic differences comparing home ownership to renting as a tenant. Number two, calculate the long-term economic effects of real property ownership. And number three, explain the classic rent versus buy comparison to a prospective real estate client. Thank you for completing this lesson. Please take a moment to go back and review those concepts you did not fully understand. Check your notebook and reach out to the instructor if you have questions. Congratulations, you made it through this lesson successfully. Now you have confidence to explain these concepts to your clients. You are on your way to a successful real estate career.